The prime goal of government is to protect the minority of the opulent from the majority. And in order to do that, you've got to fragment the majority so they really can't get together and do very much. And you have to concentrate power in the wealth of the nation.
Malice here, and let that be your welcome for the next hour. We have one of my absolute favorite people, certainly by far one of my favorite leftists, Jessica Tarlov, Democratic strategist, head of research at Bustle, Fox News contributor, unrepentant Clintonista.
Absolutely, all of those things.
So I saw a clip from you this morning where you were... The thing I love about you is you don't do talking points. When you have your left of center perspective, you can back it up with data and arguments as opposed to just sloganeering. But I caught something that you did this morning, which I think was very interesting. So Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez,
yes,
she has shifted very cleverly from referring herself as a democratic socialist, which is an ideology, Democrat being an adjective, to a Democrat socialist, which is two nouns, to try to pretend that she's still a Democrat, she's not a socialist first. And you used that same term this morning.
Oh, I didn't do that.
Oh, that wasn't on purpose?
I guess. No, I guess I wasn't as bright as you thought I was.
Okay. Well,
I don't want to say I'm not a tremendous fan of hers, because I am absolutely a fan of young people getting involved in the process. But at the end of the day, I actually think that what she's doing and Bernie doing all over the country is causing a lot of damage to the Democrat Party.
Right.
So I have some qualms
with that. And there's also a big problem, just like with Sarah Palin, when someone's the it girl for 10 minutes, and then when it blows up, the cost is much higher than the benefit.
Well, look at 2016.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, arguably, if you think we lost, I'm talking we, the leftists here, lost by 77,000 votes, and you look at what kind of havoc Bernie caused, or Jill Stein, the Russian sleeper agent, in all of this, it's a lot of damage for something that at the beginning just seems like a small thing.
So there's a lot of places we could go with this. Do you really think Jill Stein were you joking, or do you think she's in some way is she like a fellow traveler for Putin or a willing dupe?
She looks a lot like it when she's sitting there next to General Flynn at dinners, and the way that she talks and calling for recounts and having money that we don't know how she fundraised it. I'm not actually saying that she is a Russian agent in any way, but she certainly messed with the Democrat side, and she got 2% of the vote there.
Right.
So that's enough to make it Hillary in 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue versus Donald Trump, for sure.
Here's the question I've never heard the left address, and it's an easy one. Why is Putin such a villain, in your opinion?
Oh, for how he treats his people.
Okay.
I mean, that's first and foremost. We'll talk about it throughout the hour, but I just got back from about 10, 11 days in Russia. And when you see, I took the train from St. Petersburg to Moscow, and when you're, going through the Russian countryside, you really see the effects, not only long-term of communism, but what's still going on here, where you have an upper class and a president who's worth, I mean, they can't even figure out how many billions of dollars he's worth.
But do you think the average American who's like part of this whole Russia train really cares about like the typical Russian? Because my point is, when we're talking about North Korea, the focus is when I was on Fox and Friends first, they said, what's your big concern about the summit?
You were awake at that hour.
I was. I actually, this is really funny. Turns out I can talk about North Korea in my sleep, because when I do Fox and Friends first, I go back to bed. I usually wake up at 11 every day. Yeah. And then I literally have no memory of it. And I'll watch the clip and I'm like, oh, this is great. But the point is, they asked me what's my big concern about the summit. I said the continuing enslavement of North Korean people. For me, it's always about the North Korean people, but I never care about the Russian people from the right or the left.
I was actually just talking today. I was at Fox and Friends at 6:20, and then I took a nice little nap afterwards. And I was having this discussion with someone who works there on the tech team, that we hear all of the time about the plight of the North Korean people, of the Venezuelan people. Look at what's happening to the Syrians. Look at the Iranians. Let's make sure we can help them get the internet. Do all of these things, which we absolutely should do. And no one ever mentions the Russians,
right?
Like the people who actually live there. It's just the oligarchs, those that we're sanctioning.
Or gay rights. That's the only time that people seem to care.
Pussy Riot.
Yeah.
And I think it's great. for there to be Navalny. I'm a huge fan of his, for people to be out there taking a stand on these issues. But when you break down the numbers and you look at how many millions of people are living in abject poverty and have state-sponsored TV the same way they do in North Korea.
Sure.
They're just more advanced, and it looks like CNN or Fox News.
Right. But here's the thing, though. Why, just because someone is oppressive to his people, that doesn't inherently make that person an enemy of the United States?
No, I guess not. I mean, we work with plenty of people who are oppressive to their people.
Right.
And look at the Middle East. We stand shoulder to shoulder with Saudi.
Right.
And,
yeah.
and that's all well and good. And that's Democrat and Republican administrations. I guess, to your point, I just find it curious that we've made Russia the boogeyman here, and meddling in elections has gone on, though it seems to have been particularly aggressive in 2016. And it's such an interesting plot line that it's Donald Trump with his whole Miss America. He's been a friend of Russia as a businessman for so long that we're not talking about the extra parts of the story, which are the people and the legacy. And as a Democrat, I get called a socialist all the time. I get called a communist all the time. And that's something that really bothers me about the Russia conversation, that there's no distinctions made between these classifications, and that, what Bernie Sanders is preaching is one step away from communism, which is absolutely not.
Well, I mean, I make this point on Twitter with a lot of my readers who are like pretty far right. I go, you can't call these people communist and then get upset when they call you a Nazi. I mean, it's the same pretty much principle. But what do you see the difference being between the Bernie Sanders and Alexandra, the Democratic Socialists, and the Democratic Party?
Economics.
Okay.
Basically, I mean, I think so. I kind of take the base case understanding that everybody is very well intentioned, and the idea is that every person in America should have the best life possible. And Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has articulated that really well. She says, what do I stand for? It's not really about party ID. It's just that no one should be too poor to live in a country like America. And I think we can all get behind that idea. And then the parties have different ideas about how to lift someone up.
But don't you think poverty is there's two ways to look at poverty. There's the absolute sense and the relative sense, right? Like, no one here is starving. I actually was talking to an actual communist once, and she was making the case that more people starve in America than in North Korea. And I said, let's run the numbers. And it was like 100 people in America starved, and I think all of them were people who were like held captive by foster parents, like intentionally murdered.
Right.
So hunger, I mean, in that sense, poverty, do you think it largely has been conquered in this country?
I have to look more at the numbers before I say something like that. I know that it still needs to be a priority for us to make sure that people have 3 meals a day and that they're healthy meals and things like that. I do know in big cities, for instance, when you talk about homelessness, like in New York under Mayor Bloomberg, for instance, we had a bed for every homeless person in New York if they wanted to go to them. Now, some of them chose not to, for instance, continue to live on the street. It's also dangerous in these shelters. So to your point, there are a lot of intricacies, I guess, to these issues.
Sure.
And I don't think that we've solved hunger. There are plenty of kids who show up at school every day and there's nothing for them. That might be because they have bad parents who haven't done that, or misprioritized funds, or not applied for entitlements that can help them. We have a social safety net, which I believe strongly in, that can help you out if you can't make it. So I won't go all the way with you on that. But.
Okay, no, but that's fair. But I mean, when you say economics, what do you think they get wrong?
The numbers of it. Frankly, some of them are open about the fact that you're just going to tax the wealthy more and more in order to pay for these kinds of things. They're not drawing the line in the sand, I would say, between Venezuela and the European countries. I lived in London for 6 years after college, and I used the NHS, and it's a fantastic resource to be able to go into a place and get good quality care. And everyone should be able to do that. You will wait months for a surgery, for instance, unless you need it that day and you have like a bone sticking out of your arm or something like that. So I think that that's a point that they miss there. And the math can be fuzzy when you go back to the primary, the Dem primary. There were a number of times the Hillary Clinton campaign had to tear apart Bernie's plans on free college tuition, for instance, on healthcare, based on the numbers. And they had to do that so delicately because you can't be seen to be bullying Bernie. You can't be seen to be, bullying young people in the progressive movement and all of that. But at the end of the day, when you look at our budgets and you look at what things are going to cost, they weren't accounting properly for the ramifications of that. And Hillary got made out to be, the big bad corporatist, when she was just saying, hey, I believe in all the same things that you do. I've been fighting for essentially, single payer, as it were, since the 90s, but your plans don't add up and you're realistically not going to tax Warren Buffett 80%.
Right.
It's just not happening. He's a great guy, but he's still using the loopholes.
But I mean, before Reagan, tax rates were at certain points. Taxes were like at 98%.
At Eisenhower,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's not happening again. I mean, our upper class has gotten a lot richer, first of all, and a lot less, I don't want to say philanthropic because we're the most philanthropic nation in the world, but a lot less interested in giving back to those who have less in this country, out of their own pockets in that way. It's one thing to do charitable giving. It's quite another to say, hey, I don't mind if we all live in quasi-similar circumstances. Now, I know Rockefellers never lived like poor people.
Sure, of course.
But if you look at their legacies and families from that era, they're a lot more Gatesian than they are Trumpian.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, I mean, for people from my school of thought, those are the villains. I mean, in textbooks, we're taught
The Rockefellers or
yes,
the Trumps?
The Rockefellers.
Sad. Trumps are mine.
Well, but the Rockefellers are the ones who are using their funds to kind of control the national conversation behind the scenes. And there's this very sense of noblesse oblige, which stems back to like this aristocracy that like we're rich and important and we're going to run things on behalf of the little people, but we're still the ones who have our hands on the trough.
Right. And you don't understand.
Right.
I mean, that's what the elite, that was the argument that Trump actually made, right? That the elites are telling you what to do and they're taking your money and then they're reallocating it however they see fit. And they're not asking you if you want that pothole filled or you'd rather a new community center.
Right.
If those are your options.
And there's a big difference because Bill Gates is like, I don't know about his lobbying efforts, but he's like, you know what? We're going to stop malaria.
Yeah.
Here's a big check. Do what you need to do. I'm not asking people. This doesn't have to do with America. Like, this is a disease that kills children in Africa that is extremely easily preventable.
Right.
I'm going to do something about it, which is different from these organizations, these these big, I don't know if they're 501c3s, but like the something foundation that funds PBS. There's all these groups that have these big conferences, and it's easy to say that there's kind of this surreptitious conspiracy to it, but there is this throwback to this kind of Boston Brahmin, we are the anointed and we're rich because we're better.
Yeah, I think that's completely fair. In an ideal world, there would be a ton of billionaires who want to give it all away, just like Bill Gates does. And they would be able to do that. And they would, show up all over the world and say, there's Ebola here, there's malaria here, there's polio here, whatever, and I'm going to fix all of it. We don't have enough of them. He has a bunch in the Giving Pledge, but compared to how many millionaires, high millionaires and billionaires we have in the world, that doesn't cut it. But I do take your point. I mean, the backdoor dealings between the wealthy and the government are so complicated, made worse by a Citizens United, for instance. And I know it was a big point of contention in the 2016 election as well, when, Bernie said, I'm not taking PAC money. And Hillary said, basically, you have to be in the system to change the system, which I think is the more, again, realistic perspective about it. But it's a kind of a Sophie's choice at this point. Though less dramatic than those terms. Yeah. Like, what are you supposed to do if you recognize this problem and you want to do something about it, but you're also part of that class, which Bernie Sanders, I mean, he's been a politician since he was like 20 or something like that, and has a lot of money.
So does it bother you that Bernie is in the press treated like he's on a pedestal because there's almost no accountability for what he says, whereas Hillary is hit 10 times for every statement and plan she makes? Or
even statement and plan she didn't make.
Right.
I mean, she can't, I'm not one, we obviously spent a lot of time together the past few years. I don't, cry sexism easy. I don't cry those kind of party fouls. I think she almost won that election in spite of a lot of factors that conspired against her, including her not going to Wisconsin. And I accept all of those as big problems. But I don't know where the adulation for Bernie came from. When you break down his credentials here, I mean, you have a white Jewish guy who, he grew up in Brooklyn with not a ton of money, but, made his way. He's a lifetime politician. His wife was running a private college. He has multiple homes. And he is a champion of those without anything, or those who don't have a voice, or the kids. It's very odd. I mean, I like him. I like Larry David, too, who wrote a great op-ed. By the way, did you see about breakfast?
No.
Oh, my God. So you know how John Kelly was making terrible faces
during
the Helsinki summit? And they came out and made an excuse that he was just upset because he didn't get his breakfast. So Larry David wrote a whole op-ed and mocking him about breakfast.
But, I mean, don't you also need those people who are here's another question. Why is it that Trump is would you rather have Sophie's choice, rather have Trump as president or Mike Pence?
Oh, Trump
Oh, okay.
Until the end of time.
I've never understood the people who are like, get Trump out, put Mike Pence in.
I don't think they're... I'm not sure they're really thinking.
Right.
When they do that. They forget, his religious liberty law. And they forget that interview that he gave, where he said, like, I don't need a loan with women, and we call each other mother and father. And I'm not trying to mock evangelicals, but he's, to the extreme of this, and he has a vision of America that doesn't comport with what the majority of Americans want.
Well, he would also work much better with Congress and get his ideas
everything
through.
done.
Yeah.
I mean, he wouldn't have a press conference blunder probably, one of 50.
Right.
Maybe instead of 50 of 50.
Right. So, okay. So what do you think of this whole Trump derangement syndrome, specifically vis-a-vis these conservatives who are really even worse in many cases than Democrats when it comes to Trump, like Max Boot, Jennifer Rubin, Bill Kristol, who are really foaming at the mouth about how Trump is, they're like Louise Mensch at this point, like Trump is this kind of Putin sleeper cell and so on and so forth.
So I have issues with them that go a long way back, because I don't think it's that easy to just write a column in the Washington Post saying, like, I miss Obama. I shouldn't have, taken a proverbial dump on him for 8 years and said he's the worst president in American history. I mean, when you look at someone like Max Boot, who I enjoy his commentary, and I think for a neocon perspective, he's really good. But when you see the turnaround here, when a lot of what Trump's doing is Republican mainstream. I mean, they're getting the things that they want, which is why Paul Ryan kind of, stands idly by and says, I mean, yeah, that Access Hollywood tape, it sounded bad. Or, I mean, today he even said, oh, the president's just trolling. Like,
he said that?
Yeah. I mean, I saw a quote of it. I didn't know he knew that word.
Yeah.
But they all make excuses for him for things that would obviously never stand for anyone else. And it's because they're getting what they want. I mean, Obamacare repeal failed, but they got the individual mandate out with the tax cuts.
Right.
They have a lot to campaign on. I mean, they're stacking the courts far and wide. They're going to have 2, maybe 3 Supreme Court justice appointments. I imagine at the end of the day, Kavanaugh will get through.
Yeah.
I don't know if before the midterms or not, but, it's like survival for them and the Jennifer Rubins of the world. I mean, frankly, if I, who have believed in the Democrat Party and leftist policies, as you like to put it, my entire life, am not as repulsed as she is by some of the stuff that Trump is doing, you have to think it's a little crazy. And I was just talking to Howie Kurtz on Media Buzz on Sunday about, the John Brennans of the world, throwing around treason and traitor and things like that. And I don't work in national security, but I do know that there are definitions for these words, like there are with impeachment. You need something to impeach someone on. And we don't have crimes against America yet. When Bob Mueller's done, maybe we will. But there's a caucus, 2025, that it's their chant. And it's effective and it gets the resistance out, much like Lock Her Up did.
Sure.
Jeff Sessions, by the way, joked about Lock Her Up today, which, as the senior
just
law enforcement official in the country is hilarious.
That's just also another campaign promise that Trump broke.
Yes, but he still has time.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I answered your question.
No, you did.
I like reading what they have to say, but I resent it also because there's a lot for them to atone for. And I think that is the difficulty that a lot of Hillary supporters have with the Bernie folks who now want to be all pally with us, when that war was as fierce as it was between Trump and Hillary. What went on there in the primary and the kind of things that were thrown around.
I want to tell you guys about our first sponsor on our show. They're at shavecleanmaintain.com. The company is called Le Barbier de Bourbon, and it's the full line of men's grooming products. You get the shampoo, you get the shaving cream, you get the aftershave. It has a nice sandalwood scent, very sophisticated, and it changes shaving from a boring chore to a fun ritual that you can do every day. If you go to shavecleanmaintain.com, you get the barbershop experience at home. They've got the full line to be a grown-up guy. Take that Polo Sport, throw in the trash, and go to shavecleanmaintain.com. And if you use promo code You're Welcome, you'll get free shipping on your first order. That's shavecleanmaintain.com. Definitely check it out and shake it out. I'm not just a customer. I'm also a customer. But seriously, guys, I do use it. They sent to me as a sample, and I really enjoy it. So give them a shot. ShaveCleanMaintain.com, and let's get back into it. I was talking to Nomiki Collins, who I'm sure you're friends with, and on the set of Kennedy one day, and I said, explain to me what the base thinks of Hillary, right? I'm like, is she the equivalent of a Mitt Romney? And she actually said it's worse, because Bernie was something like 80-20 among college kids, which is
crazy.
a very basic Democratic constituency. So I don't think it's possible. It's when you see each side as a monolith. So if you're coming from the right, you assume, oh, everyone loves Hillary. It's like, no. Do you like Romney? Do you like Jeb? Of course not. So, I mean, do you think, I know your answer is going to be yes, but I want to hear why. Obviously, you think she gets an unfair rap.
I do.
Why do you think she specifically is the one who's the subject of such vitriol?
Well, I think it goes back for a lot of people to the 90s and what they felt about how her husband's scandals were handled and what she may or may not have said about bimbo eruptions and what role she played in a cover-up, and then also her decision about what she wanted to do about her marriage, which I just find ludicrous that, first of all, anyone thinks it's any of their business what someone does in their marriage. But the idea that a sitting first lady is going to walk out of the White House and just say, oh no, he treated me like crap, right? Like he slept around on me and got caught, and I'm really embarrassed, and like no woman should stand for this. I'm a feminist. Don't you remember what I said in Beijing?
Right.
Not going to happen. Just like Melania's not walking out. I mean, that woman gets humiliated every single day for very similar stuff to what happened to Hillary. And because white suburban women have been such a key flipping
the soccer moms
for Democrats, you can track a lot of it back to that. And then there were people who outside of New York, I mean, she was beloved in New York as a senator, but people, wrote the narrative that she just got that seat because her husband got it for her, right? So she was like, okay, well, you should get something great. So we're going to put you in here and then open up the Clinton Foundation. And a lot of people still have questions about how that all worked when she was Secretary of State. And I still hear regularly, granted around Fox, but, slush fund. And they didn't actually do anything when, it's all written down, the things that they've been doing. And Trump actually by accident cited one of their accomplishments recently, which I thought was hilarious, since he said that, his foundation did a lot more for people than the Clinton Foundation.
You think this Uranium One stuff is just nonsense?
It sounds like it to me. And this is what's so difficult. And part of why I love my job at Fox, because I hear things that never come up in conversations with my friends. Like Uranium One, if my friends would even know about it, is a running joke.
So let me explain to people what Uranium One is. Uranium One is this idea. Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State. Bill Clinton gets paid some huge amount of money to give a speech.
Like $500K.
Yeah. And then she okays the sale of a huge amount of American uranium to Russia at around the same time.
Yeah.
So basically the idea is this was pay for play or tit for tat.
Right. That's what they say. I mean, when you look at who actually signed off on it, Hillary didn't. She wasn't personally involved in it at all. And actually, there's no evidence that any of that uranium actually got to Russia. So there are all these little holes in the story, but there was a sale that was supposed to go to European allies, which then, if I was someone who would work in the administration, I would say that's completely normal, right? Like we share with our allies, Western democracies are not the same thing, obviously, as Russia and Putin. So that's how the story goes. And then, if I was playing party swap on Kennedy, for instance, I would say, and this is just what they do. The Clinton Foundation has been a slush fund, and, Bill Clinton gave a speech in Kazakhstan, and then this happened, and they were on Jeffrey Epstein's plane, and like, do you even know what happens on that island? And suddenly the Clintons are the worst people on the planet, but everyone hates Hillary more than him, which is always inexplicable to me.
Oh, that's easy to explain, because everyone hates a loser, and he won.
But she won other things before that, right? Like she won Senate races.
Sure.
She was, I don't know how history will look back on her, but there are people who think she was a decent enough Secretary of State.
That's not,
in
that's
08, she
claim.
lost to like the most charismatic man in, modern American history, probably in Barack Obama. So yes, she is, she's a 2-time presidential candidate loser, but in life, she's definitely a big winner. And I can't look at that, I actually would, obviously Al Gore lost his race in 2000, or the Supreme Court did for him, but Bill Clinton caused irreparable damage for the Democrat Party there.
But I think so here's my argument. So I made the case for Hillary from a right-wing perspective in 2014. Mm-hmm. And my point was, in the same way that when Nixon became president, he was in a position to move very left because who's going to argue with him? Because he's coming from a right-wing perspective, and he got the EPA, affirmative action, all sorts of arguments. She tell me if you disagree with this. She was in charge of healthcare in 93, 94. She held all the meetings in secrecy. She bungled it so badly, or was made to look as if she bungled it so badly. The Republicans got their first House majority since 1952. So that's, I mean, again, when you wouldn't have had Obama without George W. Bush.
Right.
Like, it would be hard to get him through without such vitriol and hatred for the Republican Party. So she was such an effective tool to get the Republican vote out.
Yes, and she was in 2016 again.
Yeah.
But she was demonized, I would say, more not debating the merits of what actually happened with healthcare in the 90s. And I think Newt Gingrich actually did a great deal positively for the Republicans there. And Bill Clinton helped with that because he was...
the strangulation.
Yeah.
He ran against his own party.
He did a little bit, but at least he got things done, which
Right.
looking back now on a legacy, Bill Clinton will be written up, for all of those great things. And people, the Third Way, for instance, that think tank always, look back on that time. We used to work together, things like that. And people say, I'm a Democrat like Bill Clinton, like Scoop Jackson. He's in the conversation with Scoop Jackson
Right.
because he was Contract for America. But the conversation about what Hillary did wrong used to be based more on policy merits, I think, than it is now. I mean, now it's a lot of conversations about her health, for instance, the fainting outside of the 9/11 museum, or not going to Wisconsin, or making that joke at the press gaggle in an airplane hangar somewhere about her server, like, oh, did I wipe it? I wiped it clean with a cloth. And that's not fair.
Well, I think it is fair because there's very few politicians, other than maybe Trump, who use sarcasm because it's so off-putting.
And it can be misinterpreted so
Yeah.
easily.
And so for her to be like, with the cloth and just like this, it's the snideness of it, that's not something that people like.
Oh, no, it definitely isn't. I'm just saying I would much rather, when people ask me to defend Hillary Clinton or to have a conversation about my support for her or why I think she would have made a better president than Trump, certainly, or a Bernie, I'd like to talk about policies. And now there's so much else in the conversation about her, including the Clinton Foundation, which was not her foundation. It was her husband's foundation, and Chelsea's, arguably. That's what I find unfair about it. And I don't know if there's, some ounce of sexism that gets involved in there, that we're having more conversations about how she's off-putting. Men are off-putting all the time, and they get to be president. I mean, Richard Nixon was off-putting every single day.
Sure.
And Donald Trump, started off by mocking a disabled person.
Well,
and
he actually did that same thing about Ted Cruz and about himself earlier. That same motion. So it wasn't just mocking that reporter. Yeah. Although I wouldn't put it past him either, particularly.
No. There's other... we could go to other things that he did during that campaign, besides mocking the disabled reporter and Ted Cruz. Yes, it is a motion he makes, but...
Do you not see him as being well-positioned for 2020?
So I do. And we were talking about it this morning on my segment of Fox and Friends, which you saw. You focused on the Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez part, but, his personal approval rating is going up in a sea of what Republicans and Democrats see as like a pile of poo. Right. Essentially, like, how could your approval go up post that Helsinki showing? And I think that has a lot to do with the economy going well. It has a lot to do with the fact that we had Barack Obama by the midterms in 2006, going into 2008. We have no candidate. Right. We have a bunch of people who are kind of jockeying for attention and trying to, climb on top of each other, essentially. So I think that's helping him a lot. So I see him as well positioned for 2020, but then on the other side, the numbers are really supportive of the Dems, certainly for the 2018 midterms, but also looking ahead. So it'll be interesting to see how he does if the Dems win in November, how he does with divided government, because he already doesn't really get along well.
But he's best when he's on the attack, I think, by far.
But what if he doesn't actually have, I mean, I know Congress really doesn't decide much, and it's the Senate that this comes down to, so we'll be watching how that plays out. But, Dems are going to give him a much harder time than the Freedom Caucus, for instance. Sure. And he's going, I think... You see his natural stance, which is as a New Yorker and more liberal. I'm not saying he's liberal,
no, but culturally liberal. Culturally liberal, yes,
right,
100%.
Like, at the end of the day, his policies don't reflect this now. But like, Donald Trump doesn't care who you marry. Right. Donald Trump doesn't care if you want to have an abortion. He doesn't care what you do with your life as long as you live in his building and pay high rent.
This is the point I made. Is like, he's an international hotel magnate. That's where you go to do drugs and have sex with prostitutes.
Right.
So and
that's why the P tape is real.
Right. Well, So people know this. If you're running hotels, and
Yeah.
also if you're in real estate, that's shady, and that's, all sorts of, glad handing things
the
like
construction
that.
deals
Are you
that he's
kidding me?
made. I mean, I also thought, going back to the election, there were a number of ads that came out of the Hillary Clinton camp that because Trump was just so much louder, they didn't get the attention that they deserved. But there were a series of amazing ads that featured contractors that he had stiffed. People in Atlantic City that talked about how he actually built that place and how many of them were owed hundreds of thousands of dollars. And because of the magnitude of his personality and people just accepting this is who he is, and that's better than a lifetime politician, they were like,
Here's my other issue with Hillary. I think there's an imperiousness about her. I remember in 2000 where she was a sitting first lady. She was running for the Senate. At first it was going to be Giuliani, then Jeanine Pirro, and then it ended up being Rick Lazio, who was a House member from Long Island. Her campaign put out the talking point that there's a stature gap. That was the phrase they used, meaning it's beneath her to run against him. And to this day, I can't even wrap my head around the fact that anyone would think this is a good message to put out there.
no, I can't imagine it, but I also can't imagine that Joe Crowley wouldn't have shown up to debate Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
That's fair.
It's a similar mentality. And to your point about the Rockefellers, right, that it's kind of like the political haves and have-nots, and Lazio is a have-not, right? He just has a congressional seat, and I'm the First Lady of the United States of America, and I don't need to do this.
Yeah.
And she got lucky that he chased her around.
I think there's no chance she runs in 2020.
No, I don't know why people even talk about
she would
this.
think it's beneath her to be. Why would you go from getting the nomination pretty, where it's the path's laid out for you somewhat? Now you got to throw elbows with 12 other people?
12? I've seen lists with like 35 people on it.
What do you think? I think the number's going to be around 10.
I think, well, listen, the Republicans showed us that 17 is doable.
Right.
So you have 5 on the baby stage.
Right.
And then you have the top 12.
Why is Rand Paul even here? He's terrible. He's all the way at the end. He's at 1% in the polls. He shouldn't be here.
Though there's such a discrepancy between polling and value with Lindsey Graham, because he was my favorite debater in all this. Remember how he was like talking about tequila all the time and said like, we can't have a trade war with Mexico because how am I going to get my margaritas and things like that? We need more of that. And I don't know who will be making the margarita jokes for us. But
does it bother you that Elizabeth Warren, who I think is very, very bright and is indisputably bright, how easily Trump gets her goat and how she falls for it every single time?
I try actually not to think about her a lot.
Okay.
She causes me similar headaches to Bernie because there are holes you can poke in her story. I'm not talking about the Pocahontas thing. But in terms of, I read her book as well, and she does come from poverty for sure.
And she's a Republican.
That is true as well. Hillary too.
Yeah.
But has done very well for herself, multiple homes, all of this. And it's a tough one for me because I feel like she would be one to draw the line in the sand and actually sell like a more moderate candidate down the road. And there were, she campaigned with Hillary, but it took a while to get her out there. And that's unfortunate that people can't look back at the records of some of these people and maybe separate that from what you think of their personality or that you wanted the other guy to just come together. The fact that the other side is going to be way worse. And now, returning to like 50 questions ago, when people say Democrats, socialists, and Democrats, they're not all that different when you look at the platforms. One of the biggest differences is on Israel, right? Like that was the big thing that the Sanders side tried to push Hillary to, say that what Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez said was that we were occupying Palestine. But otherwise, now it's become relatively mainstream to say Medicare for all. There's a Medicare for all caucus. To help with tuition assistance. And that's where my answer before about economics, the difference between the factions of the party comes into play, because moderate Dems would say tuition assistance versus saying free college tuition.
Let's talk economics. If you're going to subsidize something, that inevitably is going to cause the price of it to increase. It's not going to make it cheaper.
No. Well, not in the long term.
Right.
It's going to be it's a few election cycles.
Okay.
Right? Because that's what's happening with entitlements now. I mean, Social Security and Medicare are going to go bankrupt.
Right.
And no one is willing to say that with their vote necessarily. Right. They say it all the time. Paul Ryan is the poster child for that, except he says we need to get rid of it, instead of reforming entitlements or, it's dangerous in an election season for anyone to talk about means testing, for instance. I mean, I actually think it might be...
Yeah, means testing people don't know is if you're rich, why are you getting Social Security?
Well, why won't you? That's what I was just about to say. why shouldn't there be some sort of movement for rich people to give it back?
Yeah.
Just check a box. I'm not collecting social this year or next year for the next 5 years, whatever it is. You're going to make billions of dollars very quickly.
And what people don't realize is the Social Security taxes you put in throughout your life are paid back very quickly. After that, you're getting money that's tax money from other people.
Right.
This isn't your money being returned to you.
No, you're certainly not going to live post 65, 66, 67 off of money that you've paid into the system. It's going to be new money that's taken off the younger people, which is why, there was the rush to get all the 20-year-olds signed up for Obamacare.
Right.
Because we need the older people need to live off of the younger people, which I'm comfortable with that part of it for healthcare. But these conversations, no one wants to have them. And immigration, too. I was talking to Chris Steyerwalt about that. Like, everyone just lies about immigration.
Well, yeah, I mean, both sides... for me, when it comes to politics, for every action, there's a cost and there's a benefit. And it's very fair to say the costs of immigration outweigh the benefits, or vice versa. The benefits outweigh the cost. Sure, you're going to have some increase in crime, because when population increases, crime increases. Right. That's inevitable. At the same time, it's very, you say, look, the benefits, these people are going to be hardworking, blah, blah, blah. But it's always, no, it's going to be perfectly fine, even though I'm an immigrant. English is not my first language. The idea that that's going to be smooth sailing is not possible. And on the other hand, it's like, if you're going to close the door completely, we want those doctors and lawyers and just hardworking people who are going to be contributors.
Well, especially the Muslim immigrants.
Right.
I mean, the statistics on that are crazy.
Well, tell me about that.
Oh, okay, I'll tell you about that.
Yeah.
So putting aside refugees, but people that emigrated to their country, I'll have to look up the exact number, but it's some, disproportionate, like around 10% of Muslim immigrants that are coming in that are doctors.
Oh, that's insane. Oh, yeah. Are these from India, though, or are these from the Middle East?
They're from all over.
Okay.
We should pull it out. I don't want to say something and misinform your listeners. But they're incredibly well educated, and they're coming here for a better life. The whole reason that we want immigrants and all of that, and they're trained. These aren't unskilled workers who, frankly, we have a bunch of jobs that we need unskilled workers for. Tens of thousands of strawberry picking jobs that no one is doing now. So it's complicated, but we don't look at the specifics of any of it. And both sides actually, if there was some way to get comprehensive immigration reform done, which is an impossibility, there are reasons that both sides don't want to do it.
Right. And it's just the votes, the demographics. It's like, we want votes, we don't want votes. You're those votes, the end. It's as simple as that.
Absolutely.
Does it bother you that when you talk to people on the left wing of the party that I'm sure they basically think you're a Republican?
I actually now have pretty decent lefty cred.
Okay.
But I didn't at first when I first started at Fox. I also used to work for a guy called Doug Schoen.
Pollster.
Yes. Right. That's how I got into it, who was Bill Clinton's pollster in the 90s. And he came up with the term soccer moms, actually.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. So I was responsible for the 96 one, which fantastic. And Doug I wrote a book with him as well. And he's certainly more to the right with me than me. And he said he couldn't support Hillary anymore.
Wow.
Before the election. He said she would cause a constitutional crisis.
How so?
I think it had to do, frankly, I blacked out.
Was she born in Kenya?
Yes, and she's Muslim. No, it was, I think it was about issues with the foundation, maybe.
Okay.
We can look it up specifically, and he wrote about it, I think, for The Hill. Anyway, a lot of backlash then against me, like, you work for this guy. It was before I joined Bustle at the beginning of 2017. But now, I don't know. I feel like I've been able to carve out my own voice. I don't really back down a lot. If people are willing to listen to what I'm saying, it's pretty clear, I'm a center left person, strong Hillary person. There is, when you are on a network where the mainstream point of view is opposite to yours, and if you're, an affable person, I like to get along with my colleagues and have fun, there are certain things I guess you would let slide, like a joke here or there about Hillary. But no, it's not that bad anymore. And actually, people from the Hillary camp have made the lives of people like me who do go on Fox, who kind of fight in that pit, a lot better. Like Philippe Reins, Reins?
Reins, I thought it was Reins, yeah.
Reins gave an interview, I think to Mediaite, it was, where he said, stop hiding at MSNBC, guys.
Right.
Show up. Talk to Tucker.
Well, I mean, it's like Howard Dean made the point when he was Democratic National Committee chairman, we're going to have a Democratic Party in all 50 states. And so there's two scenarios. Either you stick to the base or you try to make the party like ultranational. And yeah, you're going to be fighting in Alabama. And look, you have an Alabama Senate seat now. So that's not actually that crazy at all.
Well, they did run a pedophile.
Sure. But I mean, the point is it happened.
Yes,
if there wasn't a Democratic there to take advantage of that, it would be he would have gone in 100% of the vote, right? So that's the whole point. Like Fox, from my perspective, they're very amenable to left of center people putting their view across. Does it bother you when people on your side think, oh, you're just an agent of like right-wing propaganda? Because things get a lot more right-wing than Fox.
Oh, they definitely do. And people are not paying attention to it. I mean, what goes on One American News and what Sinclair is trying to build, all of that is because they think Fox is mainstream.
Right.
Because they think it's middle of the road.
Right.
And almost sometimes I hear, never Trumpers. And that's certainly not been my experience.
Right.
So yeah, it does bother me. I mean, people who I really respect, like Dan Pfeiffer, for instance, people who worked in the Obama administration who are very, very harsh on Fox on Twitter. That's tough for me because I remember one day I was on Outnumbered and we were talking about illegal immigration. And I said, illegals commit less crimes than American natural born citizens, which is a fact. It's as a percentage of the population, they're nonviolent comparatively. And
I think part of that also feeds to if you're illegal, you commit a crime, you're really screwed if you're caught because the punishment is much more disproportionate than if you're just American citizen.
Right. And a lot of people, hardliners, then try to suggest one offense and you're out for any class of felony, for instance. Even if a grandma stealing like $20 to give it to her kid, to her grandkid. But it was really interesting. So Fox quoted it and tweeted it out, and all of these liberals picked it up, like Judd Apatow and Kurt Eichenwald, and they said
the sane people.
Judd Apatow, maybe not tentacle porn,
but
they picked it up and they said like, they were tweeting things like, how is this allowed on Fox? And like, I can't, did Fox explode because truth? And I was thinking to myself, like, A, watch so you know what's going on there. B, this is just a normal day at the office, right? That there is an exchange. And, one thing certainly to Fox's credit, there's always the other side represented on a panel.
Yes,
always, which isn't the case necessarily at the other networks.
Right. On CNN, the quote unquote Republicans are Ana Navarro and like people who are just violently anti-Trump. You're not going to have a hardcore pro-Trump person at all.
Yeah, you might get Rick Santorum by himself, but then it's, because their panels get up to 8 people, it's Rick Santorum against 7.
Right.
Or that Paris Denard, or Kayleigh McEnany, who's the RNC spokesperson, I'm quite friendly with and have a weekly segment with her on Fox, would tell me all about it. And she's like, it's tough when you end up not being able to actually counter everything because you're supposed to keep a running list because everyone has a set of complaints, which to my mind are completely legitimate. I mean, everything that happens, I probably have 7 or 8 things that I think are wrong with it. But for one person, it's really tough. And I also feel, and that's, part of why I've ended up here, on your podcast is a great place to build friendships and interests in unlike-minded people who are going to teach you something.
Yeah, when I started writing my book on the New Right, which is coming out who knows when, God help me, I was worried that my leftist friends are going to think I'm some kind of crypto-Nazi. And 100% the reaction was, thank God you're talking to these people so I don't have to, and so I can understand that world.
Yeah.
It just saddens me. And this is increasingly the case, but I think it's more the case on the left. I've seen many polls about this where people are like, there was a poll like, would you feel comfortable having a roommate from a different political persuasion? And the Republicans were far more comfortable having a Democrat roommate than the inverse.
Yeah.
And in terms of dating, you hear these stories about Tinder in New York will not date a Republican.
Well, in D.C., apparently, the people working in the Trump administration
can't get laid.
I mean, let alone a drink.
Right. So, do you not see this? Obviously, you see this as an issue.
It's a huge problem, but I do think if you want to pick the hot button issues, like obviously women's right to choose, but now like separating kids from their families, which was something that was widely decried on both sides, but was still a Republican policy at the end of the day. I think increasingly people on the left, and I'm not talking about just like the scaredy cats, like, people who don't want to go to a lecture given by Ben Shapiro, who's just going to tell you, like,
Ben Shapiro, yeah,
the scariest.
Yeah.
That a lot of people do genuinely feel like our values as Americans are not aligned. Like,
right.
Mike Pence's America doesn't look like mine. And I can say that to you very calmly. And I know what I have to do to continue to combat it and what I have to say and what kind of campaigns I have to support and all of that. But we are living in, I don't want to say 2 different Americas, but definitely 3 or 4.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that was the case 2 decades ago. People say this kind of vitriol has existed and we had all these investigations, but we had Watergate and we had Iran-Contra and we had Lewinsky and we had the Iraq Wars.
If that was the case, Reagan couldn't have won 49 states.
Yeah. I mean, who would that unicorn be?
Right. That would never happen.
Right. It would literally have
Even
to be
Obama, who was basically a unicorn,
Yes.
didn't have Reagan's win over John McCain.
No, definitely not. I mean, I think that an updated, a 12-year updated Bill Clinton could have been that again. Like, if you were ignoring the impeachment stuff,
Sure.
I think that it was still always going to be a factor about Obama that he's black. And that's inescapable.
But you don't think a lot of whites were so happy to be able to vote for a black person?
I do, on the left.
Yeah,
but
course,
I think that a lot of people, maybe not moderate Republicans, but a lot on the right who would consider themselves hardliners in a lot of ways, were very upset by it. And also not only that he was black, but that he was black and that he was that good.
Okay.
That he was that articulate, that he was a constitutional law professor, that he had a vision for America that was exciting their children, for instance.
The vision of jihad.
Yes, exactly. But I think Bill Clinton could have, if you took him and you moved it along, that obviously he was, for gay marriage, and he updated along with the country for the 2008 election, which he came around to it around Hillary anyway. I think that he might have been able to pull off a Reagan-esque situation.
Let's talk about Clinton and gay marriage, because this, I think, is an example of why people think she's so venal.
Yeah.
Did you ever hear the interview when she was on NPR with Terry Gross? Hillary was on NPR with Terry Gross, and Terry goes, when did you change your position on gay marriage? And Hillary's like, oh, it's great that our country evolved, so on and so forth. She goes, no, that's fine. But Secretary Clinton, when did you, change your position? I mean, it's like, seems like you only changed it after everyone else did, whereas a lot of people had that position way ahead of you. And she flipped her shit, and she's like, no, Terry, you're just accusing me of changing my position I said this out loud on NPR, for changing my position for political purposes. That's not what happened, and I resent the question. And it's just like, if you're at a point where you think Terry Gross is some kind of covert,
right,
Republican agent, I mean, even if you think that, I mean, to put her on blast like that, it just seemed so tone deaf to me. Yeah. And I don't think Terry Gross was wrong. Do you not think Hillary, coming from Wellesley in the 60s, was for gay marriage way before everybody else? Although I know she has that Methodist background. I mean, there's 2 sides of her.
Which is real.
There is that real, social gospel, religious, we have to save people. But there's also the radical, she came out of the whole, that era. And she was like a poster child of it.
Yeah, she definitely was. It would be interesting to know. I have fantasies on a lot of issues, about a lot of issues, where suddenly, for 10 seconds, I can see the truth.
Okay,
right?
Sure.
I can see how many Republican congressmen have paid for some woman's abortion.
Sure.
And I can know when Hillary Clinton or Joe Biden, for instance, I was reading a lot about him last week, since he said, Trump said, oh, I want to run against Joe Biden, which would be incredibly dumb for him.
Right. I think Biden would do very well.
Of course he would do very well. I mean, and a lot of the people actually, Nomiki Konst, who you mentioned, was a Biden person.
She loves him, yeah.
It's hard not to love Joe Biden, which would be part of the problem for Donald Trump, because it's easy not to love Donald Trump.
And he's also great with the blue collar and the union people.
Yeah, he's the guy from Scranton.
Right.
And, I don't actually know his net worth, but Joe Biden and Jill Biden are not living in 50 homes and shuttling, or, they're doing their public servant thing.
Sure.
Which is very appealing to people, and a lot of what they wanted from our candidate this time around. And then you got Hillary, who is, more of a private sector feel because of how much they've made over the years. So where did we begin that I got off on Biden? Oh, I don't know when she actually evolved on that issue. And it was just interesting to me to see, Obama talking, because Biden went first on the switching to being
Right.
pro-gay marriage and kind of
Let the cat
stole
the bag.
Obama's thunder that way.
Right.
And Obama apparently wasn't mad. And he said a few days later, Joe beat me to the punch here. But it's really crazy that we, live in modern American society and we want to dictate to people who you should marry. Like, love is love. But I can't imagine Barack Obama having, read his books. He didn't think that from the day he was born.
Of course.
Right? I mean, you can't imagine him in a hotel, in a college dorm room sitting around smoking a joint saying, like, I really think marriage is a contract between a man and a woman, right.
I want to tell you guys about BetDSI.com. They've been in business for over 20 years, paying winners, and they're top rated on sportsbook review sites with an easy-to-use mobile playing interface. You play, you win, you get paid. BetDSI has a great mobile app. It's easy to use from anywhere, and they offer live in-game wagering. You can make plays throughout the entire games and events, and they offer odds on pretty much everything else, including all major sports, politics, reality TV, pretty much everything. I highly recommend BetDSI.com if you want to add a little excitement to the games you are watching. And if you go to BetDSI.com and use promo code WELCOME100, that's WELCOME100, you get a 200% bonus on your initial deposit. That is free money. BetDSI.com, promo code WELCOME100. Let me ask you some of the knocks against the Clintons, and I want to hear what you have to think about them. So do you think Hillary Clinton's had a cough for like many, many years?
Yes.
Do you think she falls down the stairs more than a slinky. Do you think that all this talk about her health issues is just propaganda?
I mean, the real talk about her health issues, like, she doesn't have Parkinson's, for instance. That goes around. Like, remember the woman that they said was her Parkinson's doctor, who's like her longtime aide, who's been standing next to her.
Oh, the black guy with the pen.
There is the black guy with the pen, but this is a woman who's not Huma or
right.
So those kinds of conversations, I think, are ridiculous. Like, she should
hold on.
not have.
If she has Parkinson's, who cares? It's irrelevant. It's not a mental issue. It's just physical,
But the speculation about, I don't like speculating about health.
Okay.
It's super inappropriate because we're not doctors anyway. No one who's on TV talking about it has actually treated the person.
Right.
So you can be a doctor and say, oh, this looks like that. I mean, people say that all the time. Psychiatrists about Donald Trump. Right. Like, he's suffers from narcissistic personality disorder and maybe a little schizophrenic or what. You don't know. And the only doctor I guess we can trust is Ronnie Jackson, certainly not his doctor who got like a fax copy of what he was supposed to write.
Yeah.
And so I did think the health stuff was a little unfair. I do also think with the schedule that she kept, it's not surprising that she might have a perma cough. And she shouldn't have gone to the September 11th ceremony because she had been sick.
Right.
And then you allow the potential for someone to film you faint. I mean, it was like 90 degrees and she's always in a pantsuit and was sick. And
it wasn't 90. It was like 70.
Not really.
Yeah, September, New York. It's not 90.
Very sweaty.
I was actually at a gay wedding in New Mexico when that hit. And I look on my phone and my buddy says, Hillary's done. He's like, did you see the video? I go, what are you talking about? And I looked, and I when someone says that, you're like, yeah, okay. And then I looked, and I'm like, this looks, because they threw her in that car like a side of meat.
Right.
And I went off on Twitter so bad, because I'm like, hey, remember that episode, The Golden Girls, when they threw Dorothy in the back of the van? And one of the dudes I was supposed to share a ride to the airport with just bailed because he was so like upset by what I was tweeting. How did that make you feel that day when you saw that?
Well, I was scared at first for her health.
Okay.
I mean, it's a scary thing when you see that happen to anybody.
Sure.
And then I couldn't figure out why she went to Chelsea's and not to a hospital.
Right.
Like, even knowing now the background of what had happened, I would still go somewhere to get. I feel like that looks better.
Yes.
Than going to your kid's apartment, though. Who are we to legislate these kinds of things?
Sure.
But it was concerning, and I knew that it would be days and days of a media cycle that she's not fit enough to do this. Whereas you also think that, like, she released all of her medical records, and we haven't seen Trump until Ronnie Jackson released that. And I mean, who knows actually what's going on there? We hadn't seen anything. So I also was thinking about the double standard here, that Hillary's been more transparent, certainly about her finances and now her health, than Trump, and we're making it out, like the woman can't do it.
What do you think of this whole idea that, do you think, like, for example, when she was in 2008, and in terms of her credibility and being an honest person, Bill Sapphire back in the day, New York Times columnist, referred to her as a congenital liar, right?
Yeah.
When she got on stage, like, I can understand people padding their resume. It happens in politics. It's fine. It's universal. But when she gets on stage and says, "Oh, I remember landing and I was under sniper fire," it's like, it's not like you're confusing dates. It's not like, it wasn't Bosnia, it was actually Japan. It's like, there's no situation where a first lady, I mean, if the Secret Service would allow a first lady to run under sniper fire, it's so removed from reality. It's like, how do you look at that? It's not even that you're lying. It's like, why would you even say that to begin with?
So I have to think that it was one of those episodes where she was really scared and then created this scenario, because we know it didn't happen.
But we saw the footage. She's getting a bouquets of flowers from little children.
No, the sniper fire part.
Yeah, they showed the footage of when she actually landed in Bosnia, and it was a little kid giving her bouquets of flowers. And someone I know made that YouTube where they had snipers just in the background getting.
No, that's what I thought you meant, that there was sniper fire video. No. I was like, really? Because I'd love to put that in my my case of Hillary defense weapons. I think it must have been one of those things, when you have a childhood memory that never happened. Like something like that. I want to believe it's not malicious. But this is also an issue I run into with Benghazi all the time. And I actually just saw 13 Hours for the first time, which I know has, gotten criticism from people even within the CIA saying this isn't exactly how it happened. But it is indisputable that the story that the American people were fed was not true. Like, there wasn't a video and it wasn't a spontaneous protest. And you can't you need to plan an attack like that.
Right.
And, I am glad that Hillary said, I don't want to go on the Sunday shows. And Susan Rice said, okay, I'll do it. There are things.
And stuck her foot in her mouth.
Totally. Yeah. And she's fine.
Right.
But, Hillary, I can't even imagine what 2016 would have looked like if it had been Hillary. It's bad enough that you have the "what difference does it make" footage, which frankly, she rocked that 11 hours of testimony, and Republican, Trey Gowdy looked like a dum-dum by the end of it. And the Republican report even said as much. There were failures, obviously, but there were not Secretary Clinton's failures.
And actually the quote's a little inaccurate, because she actually said, "What difference at this point does it make?"
Right.
Meaning, I can't bring these people back.
Exactly, including one of my very good friends, Ambassador Stevens, which is why his family has always defended her and said,
I never understood this argument, because if part of the argument's like she didn't care that these people were killed, even from a purely Machiavellian point of view, just because it makes her look bad, she's going to care. And I don't believe that she didn't care that this happened at her watch.
Of course she cared.
Right.
There are people, she had a very good job at Rosen Associates, and Bill Clinton could have gone into politics and she could have been an amazingly successful lawyer and made a ton of money and done all that, but she wanted to be a public servant. And that's where I get frustrated when people dispute that she cares.
Right.
Like that this is just a business to go through what she's going through just for the prestige of it. It's also really prestigious to be CEO of Goldman Sachs.
Sure.
And she could go and do that. Maybe not CEO.
Sure,
but
I get it.
She could be making a lot more money. She could be living a lot freer of a life where she could go walk in the woods without anyone, getting in her way, taking pictures of her without being criticized around the clock and without losing. Right?
Yeah.
But she chooses to do it because she does believe in doing more for middle and lower class Americans.
I'm going to put on my tinfoil hat for a second, and I'm going to ask the tough question, and you're going to laugh, and that's fine. When you're president, any president, you have to make the call to send people to war.
Right.
And when you make that call, Clinton bombed, Bosnia, Obama, drone strikes, George Bush obviously, ran the cake, ran the table on this one. Even if this is the right thing to do, it's going to cause a lot of literal death in the short term, and it's an ugly decision, right? Do you think it's absolutely impossible that there's so many people dying around the Clintons that this is just a coincidence?
Yeah. I don't think the Clintons are offing anyone.
But here's why.
We're talking about like Vince Foster.
Not necessarily Seth Rich. Donna Brazile dedicated her book. Here's why I think it's possible. I'll just give you a specific example. Gordon Liddy, who was one of the White House Watergate burglars, he at one point was up against the executive branch, the Supreme Court, and Congress trying to whatever. And he called his contact in the FBI or the CIA, and he put this in his memoir, and he says, "If you need me, take me out. Like, don't worry about my family. Tell me where and when to stand, and I'll do it." And the guy said, "Well, it's not at that point yet." I just think when you're dealing with government, which is about murdering people many times, it's not, to me, because I don't know these people. It's not outside the realm of possibility that people do awful things to maintain their hold on power.
No, that isn't out of the realm of possibility. And we see that happening in countries, to return to our original conversation about Putin, where it's much more brazen.
Yes,
and, I walked by
right.
Boris Nemtsov's tribute, right? Right outside the Kremlin walls, which is not where Putin would have wanted it, but it's, you do things to maintain your grip on power. I happen to know, I have met the Clintons a number of times, but a lot of people who work very intimately with them, and they not the murdering type. But I understand the argument, and this is how people get angry about that. I know you're not one of those Clinton haters like that, but when I see the the things that are thrown around on Twitter, and I see some of the posts, not even necessarily on alt-right sites, just right sites or things, conservative thinker type things. I can see how when you stew all this together, you can get these narratives. Likewise, she's a little off her rocker, but when I look at what Louise Mensch is doing, or these people who are crafting,
you don't think Steve Bannon's going to get the death penalty?
Seems unlikely.
Yeah.
But people spiral, and I think it goes back to what I was saying about the values conversation that's going on right now, that we're living in such different Americas, and we see no shades of humanity in the other side. Not only are we not buddies, we're not dating, we're not hanging. The neighborhoods increasingly sectioned. The number of people who identify themselves on their Twitter bio, first of all, the deplorables, right? That they wear that as a badge of honor. But how many liberals who follow me that, it's all blue living in a red state, right? I am building this community. I'm building this wall against my neighbors.
See, walls work.
Build it. We offered him the money. He didn't take it.
Right.
So it's really sad for me. And, I know a lot of really excellent conservatives. So it's tough.
Explain this to the right, because here's another criticism which I think is extremely valid. Bill Clinton championed DOMA, the Defense of Marriage Act, which basically made it illegal at the federal level to recognize gay marriage as marriage. Yeah. He was the guy. In 2004, I don't know if you know this, John Kerry went to Bill Clinton and said, "Help me, what should I do?" And Clinton said, "Campaign against gay marriage." And John Kerry said, "No, fuck you, I'm not going to do that." And he lost.
Yeah.
So to go from, you're the guy who's spearheading this, probably the most anti-gay legislation at federal level in a very long time, to being regarded and championed by gays, the right is this just shows the hypocrisy of the left. How do you respond to that?
I respond to that it's that conversation we were just having about how everyone thinks something different privately for probably decades before they're allowed to say it publicly.
But there's one thing to think of it differently. It's another thing to push legislation.
It is. Though
what's his name? Karl Rove having a gay dad, right? And putting forth, gay marriage amendments, but then also in his memoir playing dumb and being like, "Oh, I didn't know
Dick
that."
Cheney.
Well, Dick Cheney's pro-gay rights. He was for it.
But supporting there are some things where you think that you become a conscientious objector, right? That you wouldn't serve in a Republican. I get it that he really wanted to have a few wars, and he did get to do that.
Yeah.
But you wouldn't. If I had a gay daughter and I was pro-gay marriage, because there are some people who are not, even though they have a gay relative that's close to them.
Oh, Fran Lebowitz, who I adore, a longtime New York cultural critic, she just had this thing. She goes, "Are you kidding me? Not being able to get married is one of the best things about being gay." And then she'd be like, "People used to pretend to be gay to get out of getting in the army." She's like, how is the biggest fights of gay liberation to the most confining institutions in this country? She's like, "It makes no sense to me."
Well, you do get tax breaks.
Yeah. Okay.
Which are important.
Sure. Of course.
Of course. Right. It's all about
the inheritance and
equal
things
protection
like that.
under the
Yes,
law.
course, yeah.
So, but I do understand that. And I know a number of gay couples who don't want to get married because they're saying, well, F you. You just decided today that my relationship's legitimate. I've been raising beautiful children for decades. I've been paying taxes like the rest of you and doing all of this better even. So I get that argument as well. As far as campaigning against the legislation, campaign against gay marriage and telling John Kerry something like that, he's a ruthless politician. Bill Clinton didn't get where he was going by not being that, and he's also from Arkansas. There is a different thing going on there.
Sure.
Hillary's from Chicago,
right?
So even outside and with a more conservative background than your typical Chicagoan, I think is how you would say it, Chicagoan. Bill Clinton's from Arkansas, and that was part of his appeal, right? People would say he was the first black president, with how well he got along with the South and how well he understood the dynamics there. So I think that was just part of him. And if you look at his campaigning in 2016 though as well, you could see that he doesn't move as quickly as he should. Like, there are certain things that you would expect with how good of a politician he is, that he should be able to turn on a dime about something, and it takes him a while longer for it.
Okay, here's the last question, and then we have to go, because this is the one I really want to hear. Do you think Juanita Broaddrick's telling the truth?
So Juanita Broaddrick has attacked me on Twitter a number of times.
Mazel tov.
Yeah, thank you. So I was on Hannity's radio show a few years ago, and he is a big supporter of Juanita Broaddrick's, and he's had her on, and he asked me about this, and I couldn't remember but I had done my research and found an LA Times piece that had discussed why Ken Starr had turned her down, had not wanted to use her as a witness. And I mean, people do talk about this, right? Like, there were holes in this story, and her now ex-husband said this and didn't corroborate this part of the story, even though the friend said that she knew it had happened. I don't know what happened that day. But I do know now that the party line for Democrats that they have chosen is that we believe women.
Yes.
And that's where a lot of people are getting into trouble.
And I'm going to say one thing. Women are humans.
Yeah.
Humans are capable of lying. And humans are capable of lying to maintain their hold on power. I mean, that's what's weird to me.
Well, certainly Hillary Clinton proves that out if you believe all of the narratives about her. So I'm really conflicted about that, because I mean, obviously we know he had extramarital
which is very different,
incredibly different, and a consensual affair. As Monica Lewinsky has been the best ambassador for the Me Too movement in this, she's very clear it's not assault.
Right.
It is deeply inappropriate, and such a critical component of the Me Too movement is abuse of power.
Right.
So the answer is I don't know.
Okay.
And
that's
fair. It's incredibly complicated when I, have to talk about it on air. And, like Kirsten Gillibrand, for instance, has gone complete 180 on this. The Clintons have fundraised tens of millions of dollars.
That's
for her.
Hillary's seat.
Gave
That's
her the
Hillary's seat. Yeah.
And now she says Bill Clinton should have resigned. And,
Convenient.
we believe women.
And also, who are you fooling? Like, you're saying this now that it's not going to cost you anything. You didn't say it when it, it could have hurt you. And it's just like, yeah, okay, Kristen.
Well, but that's tough as well, because I don't want to go after her because she's a great senator and a great voice for women, for military and sexual assault and military and campus assault, but she also took Al Franken down in a lot of ways as well. I mean, Schumer was apparently rumbling about it behind the scenes, but she was the first to go public with it. And when you look how things played out, I think Al Franken could have held on. I mean, that was up to his voters anyway.
I agree with you.
If he had just said, "I'm going on a 2-week sabbatical."
No, or he could have handled it. He didn't have to resign. It's not like it was right. It was inappropriate touching, which is way different from actual assault. And
there are assaulters that are in there. I mean, when I look at how someone,
Teddy Kennedy is a good example.
Fine, but I'm talking about even people just weathering these kind of scandals. Like Jim Jordan shows up on TV. He didn't assault anyone at Ohio State, but they're now like many young, now older men who say that he knew that they were being sexually abused. And he just continues to get up, put on, I was going to say his tie, but he refuses to wear a tie, and go do interviews like nothing is happening. And Al Franken was like a little beaten animal about it in the corner. And a lot of that was what was going on from our own caucus, because it's a difficult issue for us if we are the party of representing women's interests. And women are saying this happened. But I remember watching a CNN interview where one of the women said, he put his arm around me to take a picture, and like I have muffin top, and it made me uncomfortable. Like, lose 5 pounds. Yeah. We don't need to lose a senator.
Ooh, that's such a good quote. I love you so much.
That'll go really badly. But you know what I mean?
I do know exactly what you mean. So, last question. Gun to head. Who's going to be the nominee? It's way early. There's no way to predict. This is a bullshit question. I get it.
Yeah.
Gun to head. Who's going to be the nominee in 2020?
My dream?
No, like realistic.
Like reality?
Yeah. Both. Answer both.
Okay, my dream, though it's actually, I think, a plausible VP candidate, is Sherrod Brown, the junior senator.
Oh, yeah, that's not implausible at all.
Okay, for VP, though.
Yeah, that's not implausible at all.
I don't think he can be top of the ticket.
He doesn't have the platform to be president.
Right, but he is so badass.
Yes, I can see that easy. Yeah. And Ohio would win the election. Yeah.
Right, and he backs Trump on things he has to. He's just fabulous. Right now, it's really tough. I mean, obviously there's a lot of Kamala Harris talk, and I thought if we couldn't get a white woman elected, then we're not going to get a black woman elected. But someone far smarter than I am made the argument to me that she actually might be perfect because, like Obama, she can authentically speak to the black community. And we didn't touch on that when we were talking about the fissure within the Democratic Party, but black voters are the key there. Black voters don't support the progressive left.
Jess, what's going to happen when Candace Owens' prediction comes true and all the black voters leave the Democrat plantation and start voting Republican in 2020? That's going to screw things up for you when literally 90% of blacks start voting Republican.
Yes, I can't wait for that day, and I miss Candace dearly.
Wait, no, but seriously, who is it going to be? Prediction. And this is a complete bullshit prediction because it's ridiculous to predict now. I agree with that.
It is.
And I'll make my prediction. I'm predicting.
Can you go first?
I'm predicting. I'm going to put 2. And I would say this with 90% degree of certainty. It's going to be Sanders or Biden, the nominee.
Oh, okay. Then I'm going Biden because it won't be Sanders.
Well, I'll just say the reason why I say it's Sanders, because since 1968 until 2012, the Republicans always nominated the previous loser.
Oh,
and this is the first time the Democrats switched and they nominated the previous loser, Hillary, in 08, then 16. So if that pattern holds, it would be Sanders or it would be Biden, who is also kind of the previous loser.
I think if both of them are in and Biden does go for it, there are a lot of reluctant Sanders supporters because they didn't like Hillary and they didn't get Biden, who will be very happy to go back to Joe Biden.
Oh, no question.
So I think.
And he'd do great in the debates because he's so affable.
Oh my God. And he knows it. I mean, he'll say he lived through all of it. I do like also, just as a sidebar, these big city mayors, Obama's meeting with a lot of them, like Mitch Landrieu and Eric Garcetti,
that's really
who don't
hard
have
to
the
do.
name ID.
Yeah.
But putting in, an executive, at least someone who governs, up against Trump, I think is an interesting idea because senators, they're really good at talking, but how much are they managing?
Right.
So.
Jessica Tarlov, thank you
for having
so
me.
much. I will see you all next week. You are welcome.